Order. We start with questions. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Sir Desmond Swayne.
Number one, sir.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This issue arose following the Supreme Court judgment in 2020, which found certain custody orders to be unlawful. The amendment to the Legacy Act to try and deal with it has also been found unlawful by the Northern Ireland courts, so the Government is carefully exploring how to lawfully address this complex issue, alongside our commitment to implement legacy mechanisms that are fully compliant with human rights, and I will, of course, keep the House updated.
Sir Desmond.
Will he withhold the remedial order until he is certain that he can deliver the Prime Minister's pledge to prevent Gerry Adams receiving compensation?
The Government is currently considering the report of the Joint Committee on Human Rights and the representations that were made to it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm a veteran, as many of you know. Lots of my colleagues served in Northern Ireland. I was actually based in a barracks in Germany that was attacked by terrorists, so I get it. But the last government's Legacy Act offered a path to immunity for those who committed the most appalling terrorist crimes. Does the Secretary of State agree it is no surprise that the legislation was so widely opposed and that it is found to be unlawful?
Well, may I thank my honourable friend for his service in our armed forces, alongside all those who served. He is indeed absolutely right about the flawed piece of legislation that this government inherited, and we are working hard to put that right.
So, Secretary of State Alex Buck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In his opening remarks, the Secretary of State left out one crucial detail. The truth is that the last government did legislate with cross-party support to prevent people like Gerry Adams from receiving taxpayer-funded compensation. The High Court in Northern Ireland ruled that this was incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, and the Conservative government then appealed that judgment. When the Labour Party came to power last summer, they dropped that appeal. Will the Secretary of State please set out why the government decided to drop that appeal?
As I told the House a moment ago, the courts found that the clauses 46 and 47 were unlawful. And although the Northern Ireland Court of Appeal was not obviously asked to rule on that because we had withdrawn the appeal, it did comment unfavourably on those provisions. We supported clauses 46 and 47 at the time, but they haven't worked, and that is why we have to find an alternative way forward. And I would just say to the House, the main issue here is the Carltona principle, which the last government argued meant it was lawful for junior ministers to sign ICOs. The amendment to try and deal with that failed, and we need to find another way of reaffirming that principle. That's at the heart of this case.
The whole House will have heard the Secretary of State not give a reason for why the government did not continue the appeal. Government lawyers told the last government there were grounds for appeal. Policy Exchange, in a report in January written by Professor Richard Eakins and Sir Stephen Laws, said that the High Court had almost certainly been mistaken in its judgment and that there were very, very strong grounds for an appeal. So why did the government drop it? And why hasn't the government yet brought forward its own legislation to clear this mess up once and for all?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, the Supreme Court judgment was in 2020. The last government couldn't find a legal solution in almost 3 years. 3 years. They weren't able to find one. I am committed to finding one, and I promise that I will update the House when we have found it.
Colin Beesworth.
Number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the New Decade, New Approach, the UK Government committed to make funding available for a range of projects aimed at supporting community and reconciliation initiatives. My officials regularly discuss these commitments with their devolved counterparts. On addiction services, it is now for the Northern Ireland Department for Health to consider how best to use this funding and bring forth a business case to the Government on that basis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Derry were made a promise during the NDNA negotiations. I remember because I negotiated that particular part of it, where the North and Centre would get £1 million for the redevelopment of a brand new centre for addiction. Now, the Northlands organisation have saved countless lives in Derry. Now they're being told by the Department of Health and Stormont that their core funding has been cut and that this money is not guaranteed to them. Does the Minister agree with me that the Department of Health is in no position at all to undermine an international agreement?
The honourable member is a powerful advocate for his constituents, for the Northland Centre and for the need for services to tackle the scourge of addictions. I join him in recognising the need for support for people with addictions, but it is now up to the Department for Health, it's devolved, to bring forward a business plan based on their review of addiction services for what will provide the best support to the most people.
Katrina Murray.
Number 3, Mr Speaker.
Sarah Stay.
Economic growth is the priority for this government, and our industrial strategy is central to that. It will be published in June and will support the Executive's plans for growth. The latest NISRA statistics show that Northern Ireland experienced stronger growth than the UK as a whole last year.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Northern Ireland has a long and proud history of advanced engineering industries. What discussions has the Right Honourable Gentleman had with the Ministry of Defence to ensure that companies such as Spirit Aerospace are able to access this government's increased investment in defence?
Well, I'm sure my honourable friend, like the whole House, will welcome the increase in defence expenditure that was announced recently. Northern Ireland has a very strong and significant defence sector. Spirit is part of that. And the Secretary of State for Defence has made it very clear that he wants this increase in defence expenditure to result in more jobs and more orders for British companies.
Katrina Murray. Hold on. Gregory Campbell.
Mr Speaker, economic growth will be supported by physical connectivity, such as the new Grand Central Station in Belfast, where there is some controversy regarding the Irish language signage, which I know the Secretary of State made comment upon, saying there were so many more important things to be involved in. Setting that view to one side, can he confirm that if there were no executive at Stormont, that he, as Secretary of State, would be in the position of taking decisions such as that one and other equally important issues?
Well, the new Grand Central Station is a magnificent piece of infrastructure, and to any members of the House who haven't yet had the chance to visit it, I recommend that they do so. I am not contemplating for 1 second that there will not be an executive in place, because what is perhaps the single most important contribution that the executive can make to continued economic growth in Northern Ireland, it is to stay in place and to give confidence to those we are all working hard to encourage to come and invest in Northern Ireland's economic future.
Secretary of State, I regularly have representation from businesses, some of our biggest employers frustrated at the apprenticeship levy. They pay in like businesses in Britain but can't access the fund to reinvest in skills and to fix our broken skills pipeline. Would you agree with me that there's merit in devolving this to the Assembly as part of a package of measures to encourage the Executive to take responsibility and control and ambition for the local economy and to drive growth?
Well, I would say that there's a great deal that the Executive can do to help promote economic growth. I've just given one example, and investing and supporting in skills development is another, because Northern Ireland has the lowest unemployment in the United Kingdom, but it does have a higher rate of worklessness, and getting more people back into work and giving them the skills to take part in the economy will help boost growth.
Alexis.
Mr Speaker, Secretary of State, economic growth under the Winter Framework document and Northern Ireland Protocol have been severely damaged, and we see under the new EU arrangements that food and animals will be able to go between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK unfettered. Why was manufacturing not included in that, and when are they going to remove the custom posts?
Well, the SPS agreement that was reached with the European Union on Monday is extremely significant. As the honourable member will know, it has been very widely welcomed by businesses right across Northern Ireland, including the supermarkets, the retailers and farmers, because of the assistance it will give in getting rid of a lot of the elements associated with the SPS arrangement. It is the fruition of this government's determination when we came into office to negotiate a closer relationship with the EU, and that is exactly what we've done.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Dr Al Pink.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've just heard, since last we met in this place for these questions, we have had the announcement of the UK-EU SPS agreement, and that is coming as a great reassurance to many Northern Irish agri-food retailers. But the Northern Ireland Chamber has cautioned that key trade barriers remain, particularly around broader regulatory divergence across supply chains and ongoing customs issues under the Windsor framework. So can I ask the Secretary of State how the latest arrangements will ease, in his opinion, East-West trade in practice, and what specific customs reform has he identified and does he intend to pursue to further cut red tape and unlock the full potential of dual market access and latent economic growth in Northern Ireland? Thank you.
Well, I would say that in addition to the SPS deal on the issue of customs, the significantly reduced Windsor Framework customs arrangements introduced on the 1st of May will of course remain in place because the UK is not in the EU customs union and we have no intention of joining it. And it is clear from the text of the agreement what will be removed and that customs information will remain for SPS goods. But we are working hard to make life easier, and the change that was introduced on the 1st of May, for example, reduced the number of lines of information that needed to be provided from 75 to 21. That is a very good example of how we're working with the EU to make it easier for goods to flow.
Sir David Davis.
Number 4, sir.
Secretary of State.
The veterans who served in Operation Banner did so with distinction in very difficult circumstances and ultimately helped to bring about the peace that Northern Ireland now enjoys. We owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I'm currently considering measures for our legacy legislation to ensure better protections for elderly veterans, together with the Defence Secretary and the Minister for Veterans.
David Davis. Sir David.
Thank you for that. 722 of our soldiers were killed by paramilitary murderers during the Troubles. Not one of those deaths will be revisited. Because of the current circumstances, however, hundreds of brave men who served their country, as he says, with honour, patriotism and integrity, face a sword of Damocles of politically motivated trials hanging over them. I can think of no better example of two-tier justice. Whatever the government does, it has to take that away, and do so in a way that cannot be circumvented by clever, politically motivated lawyers. Will you give the House an undertaking he will do that?
Well, I would say to the right honourable gentleman, I agree with what the former Defence Secretary said in 2019. He said the British Army upholds British values, which is the rule of law, and that's what we stand for. I would just caution, if I may, the right honourable gentleman, to be a little bit careful about using the phrase politically motivated prosecutions. I hope I've correctly quoted him, because let us be clear, decisions about any prosecutions in any cases are taken by the independent public prosecution service that is entirely separate from the executive.
Shadow Minister Mike Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly support the petition brought forward by my right honourable friend, which, as of this morning, has more than 90,000 signatures, showing the strength of public feeling on this issue. But almost a year ago, the Labour Party published its manifesto saying that it would scrap the Legacy Act, yet it has still presented no alternative. Victims are in limbo and veterans are in limbo. The last Labour government handed out letters of comfort for terrorists, but nothing for elderly veterans. So when will the Secretary of State finally show the House his plans, and how can veterans have confidence that they will get the protection they deserve?
Well, I would just say to the honourable gentleman that we've begun the process of repealing and replacing the Legacy Act in the proposed draft remedial order, which would deal with conditional immunity that was struck down by the courts and which we came into office committed to remove because it did not command support across Northern Ireland, because it would have given immunity to terrorists, including terrorists who killed the soldiers that the right honourable gentleman who asked this question referred to earlier, I do intend to bring forward legislation when parliamentary time allows to complete that process, because this government has inherited a completely hopeless piece of legislation which has been found time and time again to be incompatible with our international obligations.
Gavin Robinson.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker, and the Secretary of State will know that as part of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, we've been engaging with victims right across Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom to assist them in their quest to see some personal closure, truth and justice on legacy. And veterans, like many other victims, have indicated to us that whilst they are listened to, they have not been heard. Will the Secretary of State confirm that he intends to announce his proposals on legacy in parallel with the Irish Government before the summer recess?
I will inform the House of proposals in due course. I am in discussions, and that is well known publicly, with the Irish Government, because the reason the Legacy Act resulted in so much trouble, difficulty and produced so much incompatibility with our international obligations is because the last government, having negotiated the Stormont House Agreement with the parties and the Irish Government, then decided to perform a 360-degree turn and put in legislation that didn't command support in Northern Ireland. I want to make progress on this as quickly as possible, and I'm continuing to talk to all parties about doing so.
Speaker, can I caution the Secretary of State that he should be adhering to the stranded approach, and where it is appropriate to talk to the Irish Government, it should be within that context, and he should not be subjugating our responsibilities on legacy, but nor should he be letting the Irish Government away with their obfuscation on this issue either. One of the most startling things we experienced last week was a victim who asked us collectively whether we were aware of government plans to secure a ceasefire from dissident Republicans that in return would lead to the release of dissident Republican prisoners. Can I ask the Secretary of State, in all good conscience, to recognise that dissident Republicans are a cancer in Northern Ireland and more of them should be in jail? Will he rule out the suggestion that was brought to us as a committee?
Well, I can say directly to the right honourable gentleman, there are no such plans.
Aye, please.
Thursday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Good Friday Agreement has brought peace, security and a better life to the people of Northern Ireland. It remains an unparalleled achievement almost 30 years on from its signing, and I pay tribute to all those involved in its creation for their political courage, bravery and willingness to compromise.
Speaker, I recently visited the West Bank and the occupied Palestinian territories with my honourable member from St Ives. There we saw a systematic process of one community being taken over by another, with the Israeli government building walls and fences to protect the settler community. The Minister is of course aware of the great results Mo Mowlam achieved in securing peace in Northern Ireland following a process of engagement with both sides, a process which resulted in walls and fences being broken down and a mutual respect and a common peace being achieved. Will the government commit to using the lessons of Mo Mowlam and the Northern Ireland peace process to help securing a lasting peace in the Middle East?
Well, I share with the honourable member and the whole House a wish to see lasting peace in the Middle East, and what is happening at the moment is appalling and intolerable. But I think the most important lesson from the Good Friday Agreement was the courageous political leadership that was shown by the parties to the conflict, people like John Hume and David Trimble. And I just have to say that tragically that same courageous political leadership is absent in the Middle East.
Dr. Fleur Sullivan.
Number 6, please.
Minister.
Rates of violence against women and girls are higher in Northern Ireland than anywhere else in the UK. This government is committed to working with the Executive to tackle this emergency, and I have met and supported many politicians and organisations across Northern Ireland who are doing just that. Minister Phillips and I recently met in Belfast with the Northern Ireland TEO and Justice Ministers to discuss working closely together, including on online safety and support for frontline organisations.
Florence Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The strategy for tackling violence against women and girls must challenge attitudes that enable it. Could the Minister please outline recent discussions she's had with stakeholders across Northern Ireland to support these campaign efforts?
Yeah. I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend about tackling attitudes. I have met with and I'm supporting many groups, and two to highlight that I visited are the excellent Foyle Family Justice Centre in Derry, Londonderry, which supports victims, and the work done by St Joseph's Boys' School in Cregan, who are doing fantastic work with the support of White Ribbon NI through the Shaping Mindsets programme, which tackles toxic masculinity head-on in the school.
Mr Speaker, can I thank the Minister of State for Northern Ireland for all she does in relation to her visits and the people she's encouraging across Northern Ireland, especially women and ladies and young girls. Minister, those are encouraging visits, but what we really need to see in Northern Ireland is legislative change, harder sentences, longer sentences and more people being convicted. What discussions has the Minister had with the Police and Justice Minister in Northern Ireland to ensure that legislatively we're moving fast to try and stop with all the violence against women and ladies in Northern Ireland?
I thank the honourable member for raising this, and he's absolutely right that this needs to be absolutely rooted in what happens on the ground. I've met with the executive unit who's working with the police to tackle perpetrators, and they are seeing evidence of doing that. Legislation can join up between our jurisdictions, is absolutely right, but also tackling online. That's what's come across to me in many of the visits. So the Online Safety Act is now being enacted through Ofcom, who is doing a consultation in Belfast recently about its draft guidance. It proposes practical steps for online safety on tackling misogyny, on pylons, on domestic abuse and other harms. So he's absolutely right. It's those efforts on the ground that we can all do by working together.
Luke Evans.
Number 7, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
The trade deal with the United States of America, together with the agreements with the EU and India, are very significant. Northern Ireland exporters, including services, technology and farming, will benefit in the same way as other parts of the UK. In particular, the US deal is a major opportunity for Northern Ireland farmers to sell their high-quality beef to a US market of over 300 million people.
Dr. Luke Evans.
I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for his answer, but there seems to be wildly different interpretations of what this means for Northern Ireland. So could the Secretary of State clarify what it means for imports and exports being treated under these deals when it comes to the impact of the EU tariffs? And was this explicitly discussed at the EU-UK summit?
Well, the honourable gentleman is right to point out that in the event of there being EU retaliatory tariffs directed at the United States of America, it would have an impact in Northern Ireland because of its dual market access. I can write further to him with details about how precisely it works. It depends partly on whether there is less or more than a 3% difference between the tariff in the EU and the tariff that applies in the UK.
Mr. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which we will be discussing next month at the East-West Council, remains strong. The deal with the EU will enable the smooth flow of agri-food and plants within the UK's internal market, and that's why it has been overwhelmingly welcomed by businesses.
Jim Allister.
In referring to the deal with the EU, what the Secretary of State, of course, ignores is that Northern Ireland continues to be under foreign customs code provisions, which means there are still customs checks on all goods, including agricultural, moving within this United Kingdom. Can I ask the Secretary of State, when it comes to strengthening the Union, ideologically, personally, is he committed to the Union? Not asking is he committed to the consent principle. Any separatist can accept that. Is he personally and ideologically a unionist?
I and the government support the union, and I also support the Good Friday Agreement. Just to point out to the honourable gentleman, when it comes to customs arrangements, there are no mandatory checks. There are checks as applied generally on the basis of risk and intelligent.
Greg Smith.
Number 9, sir.
Front bench. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has begun the process of repealing and replacing the previous government's Legacy Act. The draft remedial order in Parliament represents the first step, and the government will address the other issues arising from several court findings of incompatibility in primary legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened carefully to the answers the Secretary of State gave just now to my right honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State, and to my right honourable friend for Goole and Pocklington. He must understand the severe anxiety, particularly for our veterans, of not having a timescale on this. So will he at least commit to putting a deadline on it and also to taking seriously the findings of the Policy Exchange report?
Well, I listened carefully to all the representations that are made to me, including that report which I have read. I am committed to bringing forward legislation as soon as possible. It is subject to the availability of parliamentary time, but this government has come into office absolutely committed to remedying the absolute failure that the Legacy Act passed by the last government represents.